Hello, welcome to my deck profile for Regalia. This is the deck that I played in Bishop Springfest, France. Some updates, some changes. I basically forgot some fundamental lessons back when I played in Germany. So I've kind of updated to kind of remind myself of some things that I should have been doing, but also I've realized areas in which I could take a bit more risk as well, just so I could help combat certain matchups too. And it's also been updated with restrictions in mind as well, and how the format would change. So shout out to Jay and Maxime for teaming up as well during the weekend, and we'll just get started. So this starter, anything is fine, obviously, as long as it's V-Series, because they're kind of cracked. Then we've got 4 copies of Angelica. So I've replaced Freyg with Angelica because I kind of want to ride Freyg like most of the time, I think now. Sorry, Angelica most of the time. Because the thing was with Freyg is she has a CB, which has always been a bit of an issue, but I still used her because I wanted to have some sort of consistency in trying to find CO Yggdrasil. So having a card that can check top 5 and basically call the Yggdrasil was quite important at the time. But I think this deck has gone a little bit more consistent now, to the point that I can sort of take off those stabilizers that are in Freyg and start running more riskier bosses like Angelica. And this card also has a bit of a counter against Narukami, because you get gauges for free, whereas Freyg is locked behind a counterblast wall. So if you need to set up your gauges so you can protect yourself and shut down Narukami a bit, you kind of need this card a bit more, I think, as well. So it's useful. You can give more gauge as well. And because I'm not playing Thrill in this list, having this card as a ride-up and then be able to give more gauges to your back row for the following turn is also very helpful as well, because if your opponent doesn't give you Counterblast, then at least you've got your gauges already set up. So that's another reason for this choice as well. And lastly, Meg Conley. It's an anti-Meg Conley card because this card can stop Brilliant Blister as well, or really anything that targets you can stop. So even Heal Guardians that -2 crit can't really work against it as well. So that's been helpful. 4 copies of CO Yggdrasil. There's not really much to say here. Important card. You need it so that the deck is more aggressive. And obviously 4 Norns as well to go with that. They're also Regalia names, so that's also important. 4 copies of Rugisa. It's a Regalia, but also it's a decent ride if you want to look for CO Yggdrasil and have like a reset early game, which doesn't always happen, but it happens in some games. There's also Var, which is a good target. You can also just find a Norn, which can then be one of the 2 Norns you're trying to get, because ideally you want to have 2 Norns as well on the field. And also this card's good with Var, so if you have a Regalia gauge put under Var, you can retire Var, countercharge, and then you have 2 Regalias in drop, and you can use this card to Soul Charge a 2-pack and then go into Marduk. You can use it with Minerva as well, which helps, and even Jag de Ragnar as well. Then 3 copies of Veratrum. So Veratrum, this card is what I should have played in Germany. So I played a lot more grade 2s in that list, and the problem is that I had games where my hands were really bad in terms of guarding and things. So having those low shields kind of hurt, and so I decided to play like some grade 2s which have special shield, but also this card technically is good against Steam Maidens anyway, for the multi-attack combos, if you draw into it, of course, though, because I did play 1 game against Steam Maiden, which I couldn't draw into this, so I basically just died. Well, there were a few problems that game. I damaged the knight. I kept Steam Maiden on 1 damage face down, but then they had the second copy of Boar, so it was enough to kind of just about put me on 6 damage as well. That was actually the 1 game I lost during the day. Then we've got Knight of Excision Dioriang. So this card is like a Greed Shade clone. So what it does is you can basically Soul Blast when placed, and you can basically add any Genesis card from the drop to hand, basically anything of the same kind as your Vanguard. So you can't use it with like nation generic stuff, basically. It has to be like actual clans, 1 clan only thing. And this card's very good also with triggers, so you can add Dreaming Dragon as well. Also, if you have a Stride that doesn't really let you Soul Blast the Perfect Guard, the Regalia Perfect Guard, such as Amaruda, or some other situation comes up, then you can always Soul Blast that PG to recycle it. This card can also help you Soul Blast grade 3s to use for all day now as well. So you've now got ways of preventing deck out better than it used to be. So the deck is definitely a lot more smoother. You can also add Yggdrasil to your hand, or even the grade 3s you need to ride as well, which is part of the reason you don't really need Freyg as much anymore now, is because of this card. Because you've now got more stability in this deck than it's ever had since like G-Era. G-Era was, I think, the last time it's had like stable card support, and obviously you don't really play as much as stuff from then. 4 copies of Var. Var is the main counter charger, soul charger, helps you to Marduk people as well. And then we've got 4 copies. Oh, and also it's 10k shield, which is important. A Regalia name with 10k shield. 4 copies of Jotun. This is the perfect card. I think I prefer over Sentinel crits because over triggers exist, and also there are problems with certain matchups where they have just too much power, and Sentinel crits just don't feel worth it. But I do like Sentinel crits because they don't really feel like filler if you're running them compared to like some of the other triggers I've got. Well, a couple filler slots I've got. Ordinal is nice to have as well because it prevents deck out and it can also power buff. Now, I want to play an extra grade 1 just so that I don't have to mulligan as awkwardly in some games, because basically what happens is sometimes you open too many grade 2s, but you think, well, what happened if one of those grade 2s was actually a grade 1, like one of the grade 2s that would be played? Then maybe those hands could have been mulligans a little bit more comfortably. So I was wondering if maybe 4 copies of Ratcham was a bit too much, so I decided to play the Stratus. The thing is with the Stratus is at least if you have this in hand by chance, like still in hand, you can drop your critical Stratus to guard instead, rather than holding onto his 50k shields to drop, so it has that advantage. You can also search for CEO Yggdrasil as well. Next we play the generic overtrigger, so it's a bit different to the Ket one, because basically I'm playing more non-Regalias now, so it's a bit risky because Minerva might not actually succeed every time, which means that if you can't take away your own drive checks with this to stop the Ket overtrigger from decking you out, then there's another argument to actually playing this over the Ket one. But obviously the Ket one's nice if you go first, because if you go first, sorry, not first, if you go into like Marduk, sorry, or if you go into like your first stride, because obviously you build up a lot of hand. With CEO Yggdrasil you can restand, have 2 in 1 drive as well. You can also try and maybe get crits more often as well if you didn't get enough crits, but because of the risk of deck out, which is caused by not having the most reliable Minerva, this card ends up being a bit more of a bad choice. Then Dreaming Dragon, because you can add to your hand with the Knight cards. That's the main reason for playing it. Then 2 copies of the Tablet Angel crit. You know what, I don't even think this card actually... I mean, there was one game I think I dry checked it, I think, that comes to mind. But normally I was playing like 11 crits, so if that had been a crit then that would have been more lethal, but I had the OT in that game, so the game kind of ended a bit too soon as well. Then there's 2 copies of Tablet Angel. Tablet Angel, basically what it does is it's just a GB1 crit, gives you soul, can be handy, but it's mostly just filler. I mean, you can use it sometimes if you decide to like rush your opponent and you just don't have any units to call really into the spare slots. I used it, I think, on a turn with Museport. I can't remember. Oh no, I think I was planning to use it, but then it didn't happen in the end because I started drawing into other stuff. But you can always use Museport to power this up to make it into an 8k and then just have another unit to hit someone with. But I think I had a challenge because I think I might have had a game where I had like these and I was against, I think, Eugene. But obviously if you do 8 plus 1 4k, it's obviously going to be 12, which doesn't hit a 13k base. So I think I had something like that going through my mind in that game, but I also think I used these as well because this also gives power. So this card, Regalia crit, is obviously got the Regalia name, but also you're able to actually give power. Even if you decide to go Marduk where you don't have GB1 to draw with, you can still use it just to give 3k power, just because your Vanguard's grade 3. If you want to go for broke, basically, you can do that. Obviously, makes you a bit more vulnerable in the following turn, but you can always use it for Desperate Soul, Desperate Gauges as well, in addition. But it's generally a nice card. If you have 2 of these, then you can hit for a magical number with CEO Yggdrasil. Then 4 copies of Mushu, the Stride crit. The Stride crit just helps you stride, obviously. And I'm not playing enough Regalia strides this, so this card becomes more important. But the deck doesn't really have anything else it really wants to play besides old school Regalia cards with low stats. Although I may play the heal trigger since it's getting errated. So since we've got now the new Harmonix Messiah errata, we may not need to play like the grade 3 heals as much now, especially when the deck has Marduk as well, when it tries to kind of ride up as much as it can. It's something I'll be taking into consideration as well. So these might not stay for too long, but the grade 3 heals are handy when you need to defend yourself as well against some of the high rolls you. And then 4 copies of Minerva. Not much to be said there. Very good card. One of the strides that aged the best. Amaruda, and the fun thing is it's a subclass stride as well. Amaruda, Marduk. So I'm now playing 1 less copy because I always had like a flex slot just for the matchup situation, which is funny because Genesis never used to have flex slots, but Regalia kind of always had a bit of options actually compared to non-Regalia Genesis. Then, well actually at least since the end of G, that is. 1 copy of Jag Ragnar. This is an alternate finisher to Minerva as well. You can burst Guardians, you can deck your opponent out as well. I actually used Amaruda, by the way, in one of my games against Granblue because I saw that there was a lack of Sentinels in drop zone, and I thought, okay, well, I could try and kind of go for broke because I had the conditions to meet it as well. I could set it up, so I went for it. Obviously, it's risky because you have to soul charge 15. Sorry, not 15. Soul charge 5 while drawing 2. But so you can deck yourself out a bit more. You might soul charge stuff you don't want to see, and so it's always got that problem. But I think it, while the opponent survived, I think it was a good enough payoff to make them lose hand, so that they had a bad bounty turn, but I managed to survive it, and then I went for my turn 4 win. Then after that, 2 Regalia, Prehistoric Regalia Earth. I don't use her as often because in this deck list I can't really give 3 gauges as often, unless I use Angelica prior. Then I could, but basically there's situations where you may think, okay, this card might be worth going into because the opponent might not have PGs, but then you realize, like as in while they're on like 3 or less damage, but then you realize, oh, I only have 1 face-up damage that I can use for this, and I don't have gauge of norm. Like those sort of situations do come up, so I get less opportunities to use this. But I did have an opportunity to use this, which is good for counter charge if you've been damage denied. But also if you don't have Regalia Soul, then this is also good because it's a generic Soul Blaster as well to go into. Then there's Sea Breeze, so this is the flex slot. Now I replaced my second copy of Marduk with it to counter Mega Colony. So this is helpful because Marduk Soul Blast 6 card, which means that if you need to go into Minerva, you need to get 9 Regalia Soul. And the trouble with 9 Regalia Soul is that against Mega Colony, it's the worst matchup to try and get it in because you can't G-Guard, and obviously G-Guards help to turbo the Soul Charge. So going from like losing 6 Soul to then trying to climb back to 9 Regalia Soul was difficult. So Sea Breeze is there as an alternate way to gain Generation Break 1 by using your Counterblast instead of your Soul for that. So it's a bit more Counterblast heavier, but it's worth it, I would say. So you can just play a grade 2 game for a bit if you have to until you get the damage, and then you just go for the effect turn, and then you know for sure that once you go to your turn 4, you will have the conditions to use this, which means you're not just automatically losing to Mega Colony just because of that. So that's why I'm playing this. 2 copies of Ear because it's a good G Guardian. Obviously not good against Mega Colony. -2 crit, Dismal to protect your important rears. Anti-Decap, also a big shield if you don't need the Soul. You can go into Loria as well. So that's basically it for my G-Zone. Hope you enjoy the deck profile, and thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later. Goodbye.